welcome to The Executive Appeal, a show that convenes the world's most powerful and successful leaders to share mentoring and career advancement advice to help you successfully transition into senior level executive positions. I'm your host, Alex Tremble, award-winning speaker, author, and leadership expert with over a decade of experience coaching and advising some of our nation's most senior level government leaders. So if you're ready to reach your goals, let's get started.
Hey, welcome, you ambitious leaders, to another power-packed episode of The Executive Appeal. I am your host, Alex D. Tremble, and I am here and thrilled to have you join us today. This is the podcast where we go beyond the ordinary, moving past the cliche advice of just work hard to actually uncover the true secrets of success at the executive level. And look, again, I'm consistently stoked and happy that this podcast is now ranked top 10 in the world. And it didn't happen by accident. It was you who made that possible, and it will be you who determines the continued success of this show. So if you find value in what we share in this episode and these episodes, please do us a favor. Click the like, click the subscribe, comment below. All of these interactions by you is what pushes the algorithm to share this with more and more people, which means that we have a larger impact and more people can benefit from the conversations we have. So I encourage you, please, and this is your ask, if you're here, just go on and literally click that like, click to subscribe, comment saying yes or HELL, yes, HE hockey stick, yes. Either one of those, please do show your support. And without any further ado, let me say today is a good day. See, today we have the always amazing Miss Donna Miller. Donna Miller is the co-founder and CEO of Purse Power and the Chief Growth Officer and Human Capital Management within an IT firm. She has over 30 years of hands-on experience as an entrepreneur and executive in Fortune 500 companies. She is an award-winning talent management consultant and formally trained as an executive coach. So her and I have a lot in common there. The theme of Donna's career has been around initiating, driving, and managing organizational transformation. How are you doing this wonderful day, madam?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Alex. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, shoot. Anytime you and I can get together, I'm super excited because we always have some great conversations. Mm-hmm. So, I wanted to start us off with, this may seem like an odd question, but I have been thinking about it a lot. And some of you who've heard the last couple episodes, you might have heard me mention or ask a question to it. I want to ask it very directly to Donna. So I am a huge believer that as you move up the ranks, it is not what you do. It's not as much as what you do that determines your success as much it is as what you don't do. And I am a huge believer that in order for us to be successful, really to lean into our passion areas where we're strong, we have to remove those things off our plate that, we can delegate to someone else, or maybe things just don't need to be done. So my question for you is, you have served in these amazing positions. What in your life did you have to give up? Did you have to remove from your plate that you were like, oh, I really don't want to, but it ultimately made you a better person, a better leader?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So a couple of things are coming to mind as you were talking. I mean, one of the things that happens as you move up inside an organization and you become an executive, a lot of people have been rewarded and recognized for what they've done, right? That's why they've gotten ahead. They're doers, and people count on them to be doers. When you move to the executive level, it is no longer about you doing, it's about you enabling other people to do. And I know for a lot of folks, if their identity is tied up in what they do, it's very tough to make that leap, to let go of the day-to-day operational things to play at the next level. One of the things I do with my coachees is I ask them, are you doing the $15 an hour work, or are you doing the $500 an hour work? And one of the things people really need to do is have a litmus test to say, am I working on the right things? And to your point, I mean, a lot of senior executives have a rough time delegating. They do. And what I try to advise them to do is, hey, let the people underneath you know what you've got going on, because for them, It's a developmental opportunity. If for you, it's just old hat, right? And they may very well want to take on some things that you'd never think about delegating. So it is tough when you're a doer to move into the executive level and think more strategically and operate more strategically. And I think that that's something that I've been able to do. I can still go down to the weeds sometimes if I get stressed out. So it's a matter of just making sure that you're playing at the right level in the organization, given the role you're in. I can't hear you now. I'm sorry.
That I was saying that I was just joking with everyone, just joking. Don't you? No. I said, you and I are in complete alignment with this. And what I have found as I have these conversations with my coaching clients is that many of them, I would say mistakenly, or there's a belief that, oh, well, no, I'm humble. I want to be
exactly.
But that's not your job. You're, like you said, you enable, you facilitate. I love how you said that what may be a daily job for you is actually a developmental opportunity for someone else. And it's like, how do you suggest making that shift from, oh, I'm trying to be humble, to, hey, let me allow someone else the opportunity to grow?
Yeah, it's interesting. So just for reference, I mean, you and I are very aligned. And one of the things I talk to my coachees about all the time is the stories they're telling themselves. We react emotionally to our own story, whatever it is, the way we interpret something. And there's an executive that I was working with that was taking out the trash, right? She thought she was being humble. If I'm not asking other people to do anything I wouldn't do, that kind of approach. And I said, okay, do they really want you doing that? Or do they want you focused on the strategy of the business to make sure they've got a job down the line, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think what we've got to do is, when we say I'm being humble, which, by the way, I believe that it is good to be humble. I really do believe that that's fantastic. But if we're telling ourselves a story about they're going to see me poorly if I make them take out the trash versus me doing it, I mean, you're telling yourself a story that may or may not be true. And I would argue that your team wants you to play at a higher level to get the company where it's trying to go, not to play at the lowest level possible, right?
When you talk about telling yourself that story, you then make me think about the other piece, which is our identity, and just how important our identity is to how we behave. If we see ourselves, if we have this identity of, oh, I don't want to be, quote unquote, the executive who thinks they're so above everyone, so now I'm going to do the exact opposite, right? Because that's what executives do. They think they're above everyone, so I'm not going to be that person. And again, I tell you, the vast majority of people I work with and just have been around don't see themselves like that. They see themselves as people who are passionate, who wants to do the best for the organization, who are mission focused, and they want to help others. But I think it's so easy to look around our media, again, the movies, the stories that are being told about who these quote unquote executives are. They're all power hungry. They all fly around on private jets, but that's not the reality. That's not who these people are. And I think if we tell ourselves those stories of who those people are, now it impacts how we interact with them and how we then treat ourselves.
You're making a fantastic point. So I do personality instruments. I'm sure you do too. There are people that very much respect authority figures. They believe in hierarchy. They believe in protocol. They're very intimidated by authority figures. And in reality, you're going to be more successful, I think, if you see them as people and you talk to them as people.
Preach.
You'd be surprised how effective it is to relate to executives as a person who's got their foibles, who's got their insecurities, just like anybody else. Does that make sense? I think you're more likely to go forward in your career than if you are intimidated by authority figures. Am I making sense?
You're making 100% sense. And when people ask me, like, what was the biggest thing I learned at the beginning of my career? So I was blessed. I oversaw executive leadership development for the U.S. Department of the Interior when I was 23 years old. That made no sense, right? The biggest thing I learned from that job and doing it for all those years was that those people were people. We just have conversations and talk and laugh and joke and what was your weekend? Or they had this issue, or they had that issue. And because I saw them as people, and in my situation, technically as peers, right? Because that's who those are my customers. I never felt afraid around them. I never felt worried or anxious around them. And they then felt like I was, and I also, then I treated them as a normal person. Whereas many times people will won't treat them as a number. They're afraid to say certain things like, oh, let me act like this, let me tighten, let me button up my tie or whatever it may be. And because they don't treat them like a normal person, the relationship doesn't gel as effectively or as smoothly as it could,
Yeah, I agree. And people act stilted sometimes, and it's good to prepare, certainly great to prepare for conversations with senior executives, be ready for whatever. But that really formal interaction with people sets up this hierarchical interaction. And so be prepared is all get out, right? But they are people. And if you talk to them like people, you'll get a lot farther, in my opinion.
I'll tell you a funny story. I think it's hilarious anyways. So my wife is Burmese, and when we bought our house years ago, we invited the monks over from the monastery to come and bless the house. And so my wife and her friend, they were at the house and they're cooking, get everything ready for it. And I had to drive to go pick up the monk. I like this monk. He's a really nice guy. But I have to drive. I'm nervous. I'm now driving an hour away to pick up a monk, and I'm going to be driving back with him by myself for an hour. I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to talk about for this month? It's going to be a quiet car ride. So I pick him up. We're driving back, and this guy is hilarious. Like, he's making so many jokes, and I'm like, I didn't expect this at all. So now we're just laughing and going back and forth. He gets to the house. And again, everyone's like treating him with so much reverence, and they're all the things, showing respect. And he actually looks at me on the side and was like, he's pointing to our wine rack, and he's like, I want some juice. I'm like, no, that's wine. He's like, give me juice. Like, and he's joking, and he started. I noticed that he's actually making a joke about saying I want juice, but he knows it's wine because they don't drink alcohol. And I bring my wife to the side. I'm like, sweetheart, like he's talking about drinking wine, and she gets upset with me. Alex, no, he's a monk. You don't make jokes like that. I'm like, sweetheart, I'm not joking. And he keeps making little sly remarks when they're not looking, and I'm like, you're making me look crazy, man. And finally, my wife catches one of them, and she says, oh my God, he's really making jokes. I thought you were just being yourself, but no. And I said to say, he now, every time I see him, he makes so many jokes. He was joking about, I want some ribs. Like, he just, they don't normally eat that, but he feels comfortable talking to me because I'm one of the few people who will talk to him as a person versus a high up monk. And again, I think the same thing in regards to the relationships we could build with senior level executives is, yes, be prepared. Yes, be ready and be respectful. But remember, they're people, and sometimes they want to let their hair down too. And if you treat them in that respect, then they can't let their hair down because now they have to fulfill that quote unquote role.
Agreed. Absolutely.
So again, now again, I know we went down this pipe, so I thank you for going down that, Remy. I have another question that is completely different direction, but I'd love to hear your perspective on this, especially because of your HR background and the environment and the places you've been. So I think, as you know, many of my audience members know, I have a 9-month-old baby now. He's freaking awesome. He's amazing. He's all the things. Wish he could sleep more, but hey, can't be perfect. But it took us a while to get there. It actually took us a total of 5 years to have our little boy. And, had to go through IVF treatments, and it was a lot of emotion, a lot of doctor visits, a lot of poking and prodding. And we remember through the process, for years, people kept asking us, hey, when are you going to have a kid? Hey, when are you going to have a kid? Oh my God, you just have such a great kid. And every time someone said that, it was like a dagger, right? Like it hurt because obviously they didn't know it, but we're trying, but we can't. And you don't want to keep talking about it every single time. So it hurt. And so we have a family member, someone who's really close to us, who also went through the process of having a kid. It took them a while. and it was difficult for them. And we talked about, both of us were like, hey, how much it hurts when, not only when people were asking us about our kid, but honestly, sometimes we just see pictures of people with their kids, like, oh, I'm pregnant. Oh, I just had this baby. And we're like, oh, why can't that be us? So there was a lot of difficult emotion through that process. Now, here's the question. When we finally found out that we were actually pregnant, but now our boy, and he was our second because of our daughter didn't make it. When we found out that he was, healthy moving forward, we wanted to tell that person who we had talked to, but we didn't want that person to feel bad because, we weren't sure, they haven't gotten pregnant yet. And I think maybe like 5 months into the pregnancy, finally we told that person, and that person said, oh my God, I'm pregnant too. And they were 4 months into it. They were 6 months into it. So we're a month apart. But we've realized that neither one of us wanted to hurt the other person. So neither one of us shared the good news with the other person. And so my question becomes, at times we are in a place where we want to be in our society. We want to be more cognizant of people's feelings. And so we may hold back pieces of ourselves and what's going on in our life. At the same time, we found ourselves in a situation where we wanted to share. Well, again, we didn't feel comfortable because we didn't know if we're going to help hurt that person. Is there a line? Is there a rule of thumb? Like, how do you navigate this space nowadays when you want to be respectful of other people's feelings, and you also don't want to hold back your feelings on something because you don't know how it's going to impact someone else?
Oh, for heaven's sakes. Wow. That is a hard question. That is a really hard question. And just for reference, I went through something similar. We tried for 10 years. We ended up with triplets at the end of it when I was 39. So I can relate to what you're saying, and lost a couple pregnancies in the interim and all of that. So I get it. I get it. Gosh, I don't know that I've got a magic bullet. I don't know whether, I honestly have no idea. I don't know if you could suss out whether you can communicate with people. I think the people that love you will be excited for you no matter what, right? Even though it's painful for them personally. What do you think? That's a really hard one.
This is something I toil over a lot. When that happened, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that we held off telling good news because we didn't want to hurt them, but they held off telling good news because they didn't want to hurt us. And I was stumped. I'm like, how do we deal with this? And I think, again, I can get myself in trouble, but I think we have to. In retrospect, I would have just told the person. I would say, hey, look, I know you're going through this, and we're rooting for you and everything, and we want to share some good news with you. And I think I would have said it, because holding it back didn't help us, because that person means a lot to us. And it wasn't like it doesn't matter, I guess, that we weren't trying to hurt someone or we're trying to hurt someone. The intention was not to hurt someone, but it's to share good news. And we think that that person would have been happy for us regardless, right? I think that's where I would have leaned.
The other thing that's occurring to me is if I were in the middle of that struggle myself and somebody told me they'd been through a struggle and they finally were pregnant, that might be encouraging to me. You know what I mean? In that, okay, that can happen for me too.
Yeah.
So I hear what you're saying. It's a double-edged sword. And I really do think the people that love you and care about you are going to be excited for you, even if it's painful for them. But the other side of that, to your point, you're both working on it, both having trouble. One succeeded. The other one might go, okay, we're next. I don't know.
The question kind of came out of, one, that was important to me, but two, as I look around the job market, there's huge layoffs in the IT sector. And as I talk to some individuals, they're very excited. Oh, I just got this new opportunity, so on and so forth. But then other people are like, oh, I'm still looking. I've been looking for the last 9 months. And so I was wondering, again, as we are navigating our relationships with people who are really important to us, like, how much do we share? How do we couch these things? But again, this is difficult. This is why we have this conversation. This is I think if you had the golden arrow for this, whatever pill, we'd have this best-selling book. But I think this is life. Life is not easy all the time. It's not just black and white. It's a lot of gray that we have to navigate. The last thing I'll say on this is, as we're having these conversations, think about, yes, as you're saying it, maybe you want to practice for yourself, understand what the point is you want to make, and maybe you want to pay attention to that person's body language, to their tone, to how they're looking. If you're seeing they're starting to get a little distressed, maybe you curve off that conversation a little bit and then talk more about them. Hey, what's going on in your life? How can I be supportive? And again, just being aware that yes, you want to share something, and there is another person there.
Yeah, it's interesting because what was going on for me too is I believe in stating your intention out loud, and also in the moment. Hey, your body language just changed. Like, how are you responding to what I'm saying? Just finding out for real, because again, back to stories. We tell ourselves stories about what other people's behavior means, and we're dead wrong half the time. So I think you could check in the moment, right, and then course correct if you are causing somebody pain or they're getting concerned or whatever. You can call it out in real time. I spent 10 years of my career laying people off. From 4,000 exempt employees at a telecom company to 400 managers. I did all kinds of restructurings, and I was in the computer industry when the .com bubble burst. All right. So I get exactly what you're talking about the whole job search and layoffs and how open you are and all of those things. In reality, tell everybody that you're looking for a job. Tell absolutely everybody, because something like 75% of the job openings are never posted anywhere, right?
Yes.
You're going to get them through a friend of a friend of a friend. You need to get your resume together. You need to network like mad before it happens, by the way. Start networking, take people to coffee, and then tell people what's going on, offer your resume, ask them to help hand it to somebody. What I tell people is, and I love HR. I was in HR for 30 years. HR can't help you get the job. They can stop you, right? The person that can help you get the job is the hiring manager. So what you really want is you want somebody internal to the company to take your resume down to the hiring manager and hand it to him or her. That's what you really want to try to get in. But people have to know that you're looking and know about your background and help market you and be willing to market you before you're going to get that kind of opportunity.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it's that whole, we got to remember that people, this is not a Marvel movie. Everyone is not, I'm being nerdy right now. It's not a Marvel movie. Everyone's not Professor Xavier. Professor Xavier is a mind reader. I'm saying people aren't mind readers. They don't always know what's going on in our mind. And if we need something, say something. And you may tell, 500 people, maybe 10 people are like, hey, I know something. But I feel like it's taking that shot. It literally costs you nothing to share what you're interested in. And I would take it a step further. Know what you're interested in. Don't just say, hey, I'm looking for a job, right? Say, hey, look, actually, I have this past experience. I'm really interested in this particular area. If you know someone who's in it, be intentional with painting that picture for them. So when something comes across, they can say, oh, I know someone. And the last thing I'll say on that is I always recommend, especially for people who are high performing and executives, don't shoot for the role. Don't say, oh, I want to be the CFO, or, oh, I want to be the Chico, or whatever it may be. I always tell people, talk about the responsibilities. Yeah, I want to do this with these types of people in this type of industry, because it's broad enough to allow someone to say, if someone said, oh, I have this position open, and you're like, oh, they're looking for a quote unquote CFO job, it doesn't match. Versus the responsibilities that, oh, well, I know someone who has those skills, that background. Yeah, they may be interested in this. That's always the advice I'm giving.
Yeah. The other thing is if you see a problem that they need to solve or a pain that they have, I mean, communicating what you can do in terms of their pain is the best of all worlds, right? So yes, absolutely agree in terms of what you can do and the skill sets that you got, but also if talking in terms of what you can do in terms of bringing value add to the company in addition to your skill set. Does that make sense?
100%.
Yeah. The other thing that I've done throughout my career that's just worked incredibly well for me, I've got a heck of a network. It's amazing. And what I do is I'm constantly looking for ways to match people up. You've got a need, you've got a skill, let me put you two together. And I'm constantly doing that. When you do that, you build a very robust network that everybody thinks about coming to you because you know everyone. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think the other thing that I've done and that I've recommended to people is if there's people that you're wanting to meet. For me, in Purse Power, I was trying to reach the senior executive women in my community, okay? They could care less about me, but they want to know each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I look for ways to become the conduit for them to connect with each other. And then I become the center of the wheel. I call it being the hub of the wheel in terms of the network. And when you're job hunting, that would be a particularly valuable thing to do, right? Is connect these people that you want to know to each other.
You know, again, because you're providing value, right? You're providing that value, which is those other connections, as again, spot on. I'm going to be a little transparent here. I'm going to be a little, vulnerable here. So I have always been someone who has had a significant network, a lot of connections, and those have always really worked well because, like you, I love connecting people, resources together, and things just work really well. However, I have gotten to the point over the last year, as I've been running my business full-time, GPS Leadership Solutions, the network and the amount of people reaching out to me has actually increased substantially. And it has caused me to have a little more difficulty in managing all of those relationships now. Do you have any advice or strategies on managing the relationships when you have so many people or a large number of people wanting to have a relationship with you?
That's a really interesting question. That's an interesting question. I generally don't get people that I don't really want to have a relationship reaching out to me. It's like on LinkedIn or first or second contact, right? They know somebody who knows me in general. I get it. I get it. When you're running a business in particular, time is money. You've got to focus on the things that really have a return to the investment in time. And I get that. It's very hard to do, particularly when you're trying to help people. The other thing is following up on all these connections. So you say, okay, I'll connect you with so-and-so. I'll get you with so-and-so. And then following through and making sure you actually do that. That is something that I struggle to do. And I've got a to-do list that I'm trying to check off. Yeah, you're asking me some really hard questions. I don't know that I've got a ready answer for, but I think you need to be mindful of your time and energy. And I don't know if there's something that you could do that's quick, that doesn't take a whole lot of time for you to be able to connect people with each other. Like, for example, sharing LinkedIn profiles. I mean, that's it, right? Yeah. That doesn't take a whole lot of time to do. How about you? What are you doing?
So this is what I'm trying. So the first is, again, this is the story I was telling myself, and now me needing to make an adjustment to it, that I could meet with everyone, and that became unrealistic. So I talked about my most recent book, Relationships That Work, is that there's a point a few years ago where I got so many messages all the time. People wanted to meet with me, and then they wanted my advice, and I was happy to. I was speaking on the weekends, at nights, like. It was cool. And I was sitting out one week I was so tired. There's so many meetings with people, pouring into people. And then it was at night, I was taking time away from my family. And I was like, hey, look, everything I'm telling you is in this book. It was like my first book. It was the GPS Guide to Success. And I was like, look, everything I'm telling you is in that book. Why don't you go pick it up? And they're like, oh, no, I'm okay. I was like, oh, okay. So in my mind, I was like, so you're willing to use my time, which, my time is very expensive for people who hire me and my clients, so forth. My time is worth a good deal of money, but you're not willing to invest $10 in yourself. The book was like $10, right? Or $15. And at that point, okay, there's my first level. If you want to meet with me, you got to buy the book, at least buy the book, try to read it. We can talk about it. So that was the first level. And so now I've gotten to a point where I am actually in the process of hiring an executive assistant to manage my calendar, manage my time.
Excellent.
And then for people who really want to talk to me, look, either there are many resources. There's this podcast, there's the books I have, there's the posts I make on LinkedIn. Like, there's all these resources that you can access for free, no cost or very low cost. Or if you want to talk to me, you have to make an investment in yourself as well. And so I have those individuals now, if they want to, have an initial, conversation, there's a dollar tied to it. And that dollar is not meant to be a deterrent, but it's more so like, if this is important to you, if you believe that I can pour into you and it's going to have some sort of return, then you have to be willing to invest in yourself too. And that's where I'm moving now. And then in regards to, like you said, just managing certain relationships, I'm trying to be much more using, like you said, lists. But someone taught me about it's called Todoist. And so now, it's a really cool little app. Like, every time I write something in there, like, oh, reach out to Donna in 2 weeks, and it'll automatically throw it on my calendar, and ping me in 2 weeks to say, reach out to Donna. And so, I'm also utilizing those types of technologies.
Very good. Very good. Well, I like what you're doing. The other thing is, for me, I've got a really social service bent. I mean, big time. That's at my core of who I am. And I'm trying to make a difference for women, right? So I will do things that are not financially in my best interest because I care about the cause and I care about what I'm doing. And for me, if I had to look back with regret over my lifetime, it would be if I didn't make the difference I could have made. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So for me, there is a trade-off, yes, but it's the trade-off that I want to make based on my life goals in terms of what's important to me. But I think you need to ask yourself that question.
Well, I was talking to someone the other day. I can't remember who it was. It was funny because our careers are very different, but very similar. Both of us wanted to be in the educational arena. So we were initially in our college, everything going to be I was going to be a high school counselor. I loved giving back. I loved, helping people reach their goals. Like, the high school counselor was what I wanted to be. And someone else wanted to be, I think it was like a teacher or something like that, or a principal possibly. No, it's a teacher. And ultimately, I'll become a principal. We both were in college, and at different times, and we realized, oh my God, they don't make much money. My high school counselor didn't make much money. And this person's like, oh, a teacher doesn't make that much money. So we both ended up going in the business world. And it's funny because we both said the reason why we went in the business world, because yes, we could make much more money. And that money and that the influence from those positions would allow us to then give back in other ways. Right. So when I have my clients pay certain things, then I do volunteer my time at certain institutions and certain people, because I do have someone paying for that on the back end. And the other thing I just tell you, it's been really important to me is, since my boy was born, I love spending time with him. Yes. And I realized, if I don't value my time, I won't have any time with him because I was always so busy, and I can't let everything else take away from my little boy, because he's freaking awesome. And honestly, he's my retirement plan. So I'm joking.
No, I get it. I left corporate America when my triplets were 7 because I was doing the 80-hour a week thing, and went into entrepreneurship because I had flexibility. So I could work all kinds of hours, but it was in the middle of the night. It didn't impact them. Does that make sense? So I'm with you. I think personally I would have missed the point if I hadn't had kids. So, and they're extremely important. I'm so glad for you. You had your son.
Well, I want to ask you, because you have the what do they call it, the divine 3. You have the triplets. That means you've had the opportunity to practice everything 3 times.
All at the same time, by the way.
Yes. All at the same time. So here's the question I ask all of my audience, all my guests nowadays is, how do you raise good people? Again, many of the people who listen are first generation executives, first generation senior leaders, and they have more access to resources than they had growing up, and they also have more demand on their time than maybe they're someone else. And so the question becomes, how do you allocate the right amount of resources and time to your kids so you can do what you want to do, but not forget about them, and invest in them, but not spoil them? What do you do?
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good question. So my husband and I have been together since we were 17 years old, and we had kids 15 years into our marriage. But I was a corporate executive and ended up, we made a policy. Okay, from my perspective, I wanted to keep my kids safe. Okay, with triplets, I wanted to make sure everybody got the right amount of attention, everybody was taken care of. I didn't want anyone overwhelmed. So we had one of us, my husband or myself, and a nanny for our 3 for years. And I spent my life savings doing that. But for me, it was just to keep everybody's anxiety level, tension, whatever, everybody even keel with the kids through their childhood when they were young. And they got plenty of time with us. And I think from my kids' perspective, it felt like we traded off. My husband was the focus for a month, and I was the focus for a month, and we went back and forth like that for years. Let's see here. The thing that I think I've done right is I have treated my kids as if they have a mind of their own from the beginning. So I know that a lot of the pushback you get from kids is when they don't feel like they've got a choice, and then they act out. And as a parent, they always told me, yeah, let them have a choice. It's between 2 things that you want them to pick from, right? Yeah. But you still give them a choice. But I have, throughout my kids' history, even from the time they were little kids, I would really understand how they thought, where they were coming from, what they wanted. And I really tried to understand that. Yeah. And to the point that, I even allowed my kids to push back on me, challenge me, which was hard sometimes, but I wanted to raise leaders, not followers. So I made that my intention. I think what happened out of that is we didn't have anybody go sideways, really. I mean, we didn't have that, how you get the teenage years and everybody's rambunctious and anti-parent and all those kinds of things. We never did have any of that. And I think part of the reason is because they felt heard the whole time, right? And we were listening to their perspective and treating them like they were human beings with a mind of their own the whole time. Yeah. So I think that's one of the things that we did well. The other thing is with having help in the family with my husband and I think that my kids got exposure to lots of different people, lots of different personalities, lots of different approaches. Does that make sense? And I was not very rigid about my approach. And I allowed them to learn about others and the way other people saw it. I'm not a religious person now. I went to Baylor. I was when I was younger. But a couple of my nannies were religious. I encouraged my kids to go to church with them, to hear their perspective. So I think it enabled them to deal with just about anybody, right? Understand that there are multiple perspectives and treat those other viewpoints with respect. And then one last thing, and then I'll stop. But the other thing that I try to do with my kids, and I'm sure it drives them nuts sometimes, is if they're upset with somebody, I constantly am asking, what's their perspective? Why are they seeing that way? I'm trying to get my kids to look at it from the other person's point of view. Does that make sense? Yeah. And I would switch it and switch it and switch it. And sometimes they just want you to take their side. But I was always going, okay, what's the side thing? And why? And where are they coming from?
That is everything you said. I love. And I'm going to be writing all this stuff down for my wife and I to utilize. I'm going to key on that last thing you said, because everything you said was great. And I'm going to key on that last thing you said, that skill of thinking from someone else's perspective.
Yes.
That is so important. I don't know if enough people have that nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. And you and I both, we've been around a lot of people at various levels. And we think we know what other people are thinking and why they're behaving the way that they are. And we're dead wrong like half the time. They're coming at it from another paradigm or another perspective. They were raised differently. They came from a different value system. They're from another country or area of the country. I mean, you cannot judge people's behavior based on your own paradigm because you're wrong a lot.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I love that you talked about your own paradigm. I hear this a lot. Facts are facts. Facts are facts. There is no look. The way everyone sees the world is completely different. The way we interpret the world is very different. Mm-hmm. I have a high degree of pain. I have a high pain threshold. When something hits me, I'm like, oh, it's not bad. Hits my wife, and she's like, oh my God. And I'm like, sweetheart, it's not that serious. She's like, no, it's gonna kill me. And that's just because we have different pain thresholds.
Yeah.
Something happens in life and someone says, oh, it's not that bad. Other person's like, oh, yes, it is. This is horrible. Why would we treat someone like that? Well, because one person's been desensitized from something. We all see the world so different. And if we can assume that we're wrong about someone else's perspective, just assume that, and then try to ask, I guess that's a great pause. Just to be like, you know what? Instead of me assuming that I am right all the time, maybe I'm not. So maybe I should look into this.
Yes. Well, and then Crucial Conversations, I'm sure you use it too. That's a book that I advise to every single coaching client I've got, right? And it teaches a methodology for having discussions. And this is the way it goes at a high level. So this is what I saw or heard. Okay, factually, this is what I saw or heard. Mm-hmm. This is the story I told myself about it. When I say story, I'm saying I could be wrong, or you might have an entirely different one. This is the story I told myself about what just happened, right? Mm-hmm. This is the impact it had on me. What's your side of the story? And then what do we want to both have happen going forward? Well, as soon as you do that, you really get this other side. Often when there's conflict between people, they're seeing each other as sabotaging, undermining, whatever. Does that make sense? And so by using the word story and really trying to hear the other person's perspective, you can de-escalate a lot of things, in my experience.
I will share one last story, and then I want to give you the floor real quickly. My wife and I were heading out a few months ago now. We were heading to DC for a day, just hang out for a day. My wife, get everything packed in the car, got the baby packed in the car. Wife says, hey, grab the pump, put it in the car. I said, okay, cool. I went, grabbed the pump, put it in the car. Well, I thought I was going to grab the pump. I started driving. She said, Alex, you got the pump. I'm like, oh my God, I forgot. She said, okay, drive back. She's upset with me. Whatever. I run the house, grab the pump, put it in the car. We take off, right? Later on that day, she says, her breasts are feeling full because she was breastfeeding. And I'm like, why don't you use the pump? And she says, what are you talking about? Like, sweetheart, the pump's in the car. You told me to get the pump. And she says, no, I told you to get the pump. The pump for the stroller, for the wheels in the stroller.
Oh no.
Exactly. Same. We both heard pump. Yes. Completely different interpretations of what was meant by that. Like you said, like we have to be willing to, there's some levity here, right? Like, oh shoot, she was mad at me, and she was talking about one thing, I was talking about the other thing, and it happens all the time. Humans, we do this. There's one thing that we do so often that we're all really bad at: communication. We all communicate. We all don't communicate well. I'm going to open the door for you, Miss Donna. Is there anything you could share with the audience as we wrap up?
Well, it's interesting. So the one thing that I try to get people to do, I've got a list of like 20 ground rules that I put in any interaction setting when I've got a team together. And I think the most important thing of all, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, is assume positive intent. Assume that the other person, whatever they're doing, makes perfect sense to them. And often people think that other people inside organizations are doing stuff because they're bad, wrong, stupid, manipulative, etc. And we actually assume these negative things, when in reality, we don't know why. It's way more useful to go over there and figure it out. So this is what I just saw. What's going on from your perspective, rather than inferring negative motives, right? And there's a list of those things, but turning off the internal voice when people are talking with you, don't try to come up with what you're going to say next. Really actively listen to what the other person has to say. I think if we did some of those things, assuming positive intent, listening, we could make a huge difference in our lives and others' lives around us.
Again, Donna, thank you so much for coming on. You have been amazing. I always love our conversations. Everyone, you can see why I love these conversations. They're fun. She always has great stories. Like we have a good time. For all of you, what was the biggest point? What was the biggest takeaway from this conversation? I'd love to hear that in the chat box. I want to put that in there. And again, if you haven't taken the time to click the like, to subscribe, and share this, please do that now. You know where we're going with this. If you found anything of value in today's episode, don't let it just stop there. Don't let it end with you. Don't just look back, reach back. Bring this content to someone else so they can come to the table as well and be impacted just as you were impacted. Again, if you if you'd like to invite me to come to your next show or event, hey, reach out to us at alextremble.com or gpsleadership.org. Both there, we're here to help serve you and help you reach your goals. As always, I encourage everyone, stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving. See ya.
Thanks for listening to The Executive Appeal with Alex Tremble. I invite you to follow The Executive Appeal wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow me, your host, Alex Tremble, across all socials or via email for exclusive webinars, courses, and in speaking engagements on continued topics of executive leadership. So until next time, stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving.